The mansion stood tall, its marble pillars gleaming in the fading light of the evening sun, but within its walls there was only silence, the kind that clung heavily to the air, a silence that whispered of loneliness despite all the luxury surrounding it, and that silence had become a permanent part of Adrian Cole's life ever since his beloved wife passed away 2 years earlier, leaving him a widowed father of 2 children who were too young to even understand why their mother never returned home. And though he was a millionaire with every possible comfort money could buy, Adrian carried within him a hollow ache, a void that not even his wealth or business triumphs could fill, because every day when he came back late from his corporate empire, he found only the shadows of his children asleep, their toys scattered, their laughter already faded, and he hated himself for missing it all. Yet tonight something was different because for the first time in months, he decided to come home early. Without informing anyone, not even the staff, not even the nanny, because he simply wanted to surprise his kids, to see them without warning, to catch a glimpse of what their lives were like when he wasn't there, and as his car rolled up the long driveway and the mansion lights began to glow warmly through the windows, Adrian felt a strange nervousness, as though he were about to walk into a part of his own life that he no longer knew. And when he stepped into the grand foyer, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor, he didn't hear the usual rush of footsteps from maids or the butler greeting him with stiff politeness. Instead he heard something that made his heart skip. The sound of laughter, pure, unrestrained, bubbling with joy, the kind of laughter he hadn't heard in his house since before his wife died, and it was coming from the dining hall down the corridor. So with quiet steps, almost afraid to disturb the magic of that sound, he walked closer, and as he peeked inside the room, he froze at the sight that unfolded before him. A sight that made his eyes burn with tears he hadn't shed in years, because there, at the long dining table which was always too big for his small family, sat his son Ethan, only 8 years old, laughing so hard he could barely hold his fork, and opposite him was his little daughter Lily, just 6, clapping her hands with glee as she watched the young maid who had joined them at the table, not standing like servants usually did, but sitting with them, serving them slices of chocolate cake. Wearing her simple green and white uniform but with a smile so radiant it could have lit up the whole mansion, and Adrian realized with a pang that his children were happier with her than they had ever been with him in months, because she was not just feeding them food, she was feeding them something far rarer in that empty house: love, laughter, and the warmth of family. And the sight of Lily reaching up to hug the maid's arm, saying in her sweet voice, "You're like Mommy," was what shattered Adrian completely, because he hadn't heard his daughter speak of her mother without tears since the funeral, and here she was smiling, comparing this kind young woman to the one whose absence still haunted him, and Adrian had to cover his mouth with his hand to stop a sob from escaping, tears streaming as he stood hidden in the shadows, realizing that this maid, this young woman he had barely noticed before amidst his busy business life, had done what he could not. She had healed his kids, she had given them back the gift of childhood that grief had stolen. And at that moment Adrian, the millionaire everyone envied, stood broken in the corner of his own mansion, realizing that money had never bought him the one thing his children truly needed: love, time, and a presence that held them together. And the more he watched, the more he knew his life was about to change forever. Adrian leaned silently against the doorway, unable to tear his eyes away from the simple scene before him. Every slice of chocolate cake the maid cut for his children seemed to carry a message. Every giggle from Ethan and every bright-eyed smile from Lily stabbed him with both pain and hope. And for the first time in a very long time, Adrian allowed himself to cry, not the polished, hidden tears of a man behind his office desk but raw, shaking sobs of a father who realized how much of his children's lives he had missed. And it was Lily's innocent voice that finally broke him when she looked at the maid with absolute trust and said, "Miss Clara, if Daddy comes home early one day, will you tell him that Mommy sent you to us? Because when you're here, it feels like she's here too." And hearing that, Adrian stumbled back against the wall, his chest heaving, unable to bear the purity of his daughter's words, because he had always blamed himself for not being enough, for not filling the void his late wife left behind. And yet here was this young woman, Clara, a simple maid who had somehow stepped into their broken world and given his children back the light of their mother's love. And when Clara noticed Adrian's shadow in the doorway, her smile faltered, her hands trembling as she stood abruptly, apologizing in a rush. "Sir, I didn't mean to overstep. They begged me to sit with them. I only wanted them to feel less alone." But before she could say another word, Adrian crossed the room in quick strides, his face wet with tears, and to everyone's shock, including his own, he wrapped his arms around both of his children and pulled Clara into the embrace as well, holding them as if he were afraid the moment would slip away. And Ethan, startled, whispered, "Dad, are you okay?" And Adrian nodded, his voice breaking as he said, "I'm okay now, because I see it. I see what I almost lost." And turning to Clara, he whispered hoarsely, "Thank you." You healed my kids, you gave them something I couldn't, and I will never forget this." And from that night onward, Adrian changed. He began coming home early, he joined his children at the table, he laughed again, and though grief never truly vanished, the cracks in their hearts began to mend, and Clara became more than just a maid. She became the bridge between a broken father and his children, a reminder that family is not built by wealth but by love, presence, and kindness. And one evening, months later, when Adrian tucked Lily into bed, she whispered sleepily, "Daddy, you don't cry alone anymore, right?" And Adrian smiled with tears glistening, kissing her forehead as he said, "Not anymore, sweetheart, not anymore," because he knew now that life had given him a second chance at being the father his children deserved, and it was all because of the quiet, selfless love of a woman he once overlooked, but would forever cherish, for she had not only healed his children, she had healed him too. And dear viewers, this story touched your heart. If you believe that love and kindness can heal even the deepest wounds, then please subscribe to this channel, because your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us of what truly matters in life: family, love, and the courage to change before it's too late. And we promise you that the next story will move you just as much as this one, so don't miss it. Subscribe now and join our family of hearts that believe in love's power to heal.